Okay, so in this video we're going to be looking at formulae and the autofill. I've already created a worksheet called relative addressing, and I've even put some data in. Just as a reminder, the autofill is simply by clicking on the first cell we're interested in, holding the mouse button down and dragging it over the second one so we get the pattern. Excel is looking for the pattern between those two numbers. We then go to the bottom right hand corner, click, hold the mouse button down and drag down slowly until we get to where we want, and we can let go. Excel will then auto-fill all the other numbers for us. Another way of doing that is to click on the number, the single number you want, go to the bottom right hand corner again, but this time hold down the right hand mouse button. Drag that downwards. It's showing 1 in the help bar, but as soon as I let go, it then offers me to copy cells, which is the 1, or fill series. If I go to fill series, it then recognizes that it needs to increment by 1, so I get the same result. So I could now do a formula that simply says equals that times 3, let's say. But what if I wanted to multiply all these cells by 3? Well, that's easy enough. I now click on there. There's the formula up in the bar there. There's the result of the calculation. I can now go to the bottom corner and drag this downwards. And when I let go, it's now not doing simply B3 times 3, but if I go from the B3, so if I go from our first calculation to the one below it, B3 becomes B4. If I click in the formula bar, though I originally told it to look at cell B3 and multiply it by 3, when I auto-filled downwards, Excel increased by 1 the cell reference. So it's now B4, and the blue box is showing me that. And the next one is B5, and down here is B12. That is called relative addressing. It's relative. When I pull this down, Excel is using the next address relative to the next one. The reference here was altered by 1 cell because this cell is 1 cell away from the original. This cell here has incremented by 9 because it's 9 cells away from the original cell. Now I've got another sequence of numbers here, and I've got my calculations, and there's nothing wrong with me doing something like this, saying I want to have C3 and I'm going to divide it by that number. So I'm using the formula from before in a new formula. 3 divided by 1 is 3. If I now drag that downwards, they're all 3. So I've got this calculation, and I'm dividing them by here, so this calculation is using that number there, that raw value, that raw data. This formula here is using this raw number on this side, but a formula on that side, so a formula can reference a formula, and we get a nice calculation. And the autofill means that I don't have to worry. I can now alter these numbers if I wanted to, and this will auto-calculate. Equally, I can change these numbers, and both formulae will update. It will change everything in both cells. So the autofill function is incredibly powerful. It allows me to write one formula and then replicate it down using relative addressing, and that works beautifully. That's how we are lazy in computer science. We don't want to write 10 formulae when I can write 1, or in this case 2 formulae, and I only have to write those 2 to get 20 of them out. I've also got a block of numbers here. Equals. I don't have to just work an autofill vertically. I can also do it horizontally. Equally, I wanted to show that I can do more complex formulae. Let's just look at this. So we're doing n2. I'm going to multiply it by n3, and then I'm going to add n4. 14. So I've got n2 times n3, 4 times 3, plus the 2. Now I can pull that this way. And Excel is following my instructions throughout, each calculation being there. But let's look at something else. I'm now going to do 4 plus 3 multiplied by 2. So this is going to do 4 plus 3 multiplied by 2. 4 plus 3 is 7. Multiplied by 2, I should get 14. But I got 10. Well, okay. What's the calculation? The top number plus the second number multiplied by the third number. So I've got in this column here, I'd have 10 plus 5, so that's 15, times 3, 45. So let's just make sure we get 45. None of the results are showing correctly. Why is that? Well, hopefully you remember the rules in school of BIDMAS or BODMAS. That is, and I'm going to use Excel to help it, I prefer BIDMAS, though I was taught BODMAS, and that is that way around. That is brackets, then this is why I prefer it, indices, that's to the power of or square roots, division, multiplication, addition, and subtraction. Now this is the order in which things are processed. It's actually important to remember that division and multiplication are one and the same. So they are equal. They are done in order of being encountered. So if division comes before multiplication when you're reading left to right, division will be done first. But if multiplication comes first when you read left to right, then multiplication will be done first. The same thing is true with addition and subtraction. However, if your addition comes before your multiplication, for example, as we've got here, BIDMAS applies. That means multiplication is carried out first. This is not doing 4 plus 3 times 2. This is doing 3 times 2, which is 6, plus 4, because the rules of BIDMAS are being applied throughout. If I wanted to change that calculation, if I want to do the addition first, then I have to remember the ultimate part of this rule, brackets. So if what I'm trying to do comes after the operation, then I need to use the brackets to help me. That is, I'm going to go to the formula bar, click in the formula bar, put a brackets. Now be very careful. Sometimes when you move the arrow key, Excel won't move the cursor, but it will instead move one of the boxes. Now because I'm going into the formula here, that's fine, but you will find times when you think, oh, I'll go back over the formula. I'll show you an instance of that in a moment. You move the arrow key and it changes the cell reference. So my advice is when you're working on formulae, don't use the arrow keys, use your mouse just to select where you want to go. There's the close bracket. Now it's doing 4 plus 3, 12, plus 2, 14. This now, if I replicate, remember this currently is not doing 10 plus 5, 15, times 3, 45. What it's actually doing is 5 times 3, which is 15, plus 10, which is 25. If I now autofill this across, 45 now appears because the brackets comes first before everything else. Indices are to the power. We'll have a look at that much later on and see how we do powers, but that comes after brackets. Now I was saying about the calculations. Let's say I was doing the calculation and I decided I was going to do 4 plus 3 multiplied by 2, and then I realized I didn't want to do plus, I wanted to do minus, so I could use the arrow keys. But notice as I do so, I'm now changing that box. The third box is changing. I now am getting my calculation confused. So if I use the arrow keys, I'm now not working in the function. Though I'm typing the function, I'm controlling the cell reference. So it's really important when I'm doing that, I have to now make sure I use the mouse. Now I can either do that in the formula bar or in the cell. As I said before, I recommend doing it in the formula bar simply because it's nice and long. And if I decided to do minus, I could do. And now I'm doing n2 minus n3 times n4, but we know the rules of BIDMAS, so it's doing n3 times n4, 3 times 2, which is 6, and then it's doing 4 minus 6, which is minus 2. Not 6 minus 4, remember that, it's doing 4 minus 6. It does the multiplication first, and then it subtracts that from n2. So BIDMAS is an important thing to remember when working with formulae. Do hope that helps. What we're going to look at is, in the next video, is a problem with relative addressing, and then how we resolve that issue. See you in the next video.